Let's go ahead and rewind almost exactly 525 years ago. The country of Spain had just finished reclaiming the last of the Iberian Peninsula from the North African Moors. The most brutal period of the Inquisition commenced, expelling hundreds of thousands of Jews and Muslims from Spain and Portugal, and the Genoese sailor Christopher Columbus was sent by the Spanish crown to find a new route to India. All of these events and more have had a tremendous influence on the various countries that make up what we today know as Latin America. But Latin America is one of the most misunderstood regions in the world, with many people assuming that all Latinos are a cultural, racial, and political monolith. Now, with almost 24 Spanish-speaking or Hispanic nations on the continents of North and South America, a good question to ask in this field would be, why are Hispanic countries so fractured when compared to Anglo countries like the United States and Canada, both of which take up huge swaths of land, or even the Lusophone country of Brazil, which also has a rather large area and population, and despite being the only major former Portuguese colony in the Americas, has remained completely intact in the past few hundred years. Once news spread throughout Europe about the extremely large landmass across the sea, the various European powers scrambled to declare the land for their own people or cause, with Spain clearly having first dibs, so to speak, initially having the largest chunk of the Americas and conquering the former empires of the Americas such as the Aztecs and Incas. Now, because Spain's territory was spread out through such a large area, Spain had initially divided the administration of this territory into two main divisions, or viceroyalties as they were known, that being the Viceroyalty of New Spain, including Mexico, Spanish Louisiana, which would later be transferred to the French and later to the Americans, the Spanish West Indies, Central America, Venezuela, along with the Philippines, and also the Viceroyalty of Peru, which contained all of the Spanish territories in South America except for Venezuela. New Spain and Peru would later be divided, with the Viceroyalty of New Granada cropping up, made of Colombia, Ecuador, and Venezuela, along with the Viceroyalty of Rio de la Plata, made up of Bolivia, Paraguay, Argentina, and Uruguay. Millions of European settlers arrived in Spanish America starting in the 16th century, along with African slaves, and intermarriage was extremely common in the Spanish Empire, leading to the formation of the major Latino racial groups, such as the mestizos, mulattoes, and zambos, with European-born whites dominating politics in the American colonies. This led to a strong resentment of the Castilian elite by the lower-class native-born whites known as criollos and the mixed-race mestizos, and encouraged a new form of nationalism and patriotism to grow in most of the Spanish colonies. And while disillusion with the Castilian authorities grew in the Americas, peninsular Spain was thrown into utter chaos following the war with France, with Napoleon Bonaparte occupying the Iberian Peninsula for nearly 6 years. The Hispanic American nations took advantage of this weakness, seeing how Spain was strapped of manpower and resources, and it would only be a matter of decades before every single former Spanish colony on the mainland of the American continents was effectively independent, with movements being spearheaded mainly by criollos such as Simón Bolívar, along with mestizos, mulattoes, and Amerindians. Simón Bolívar saw Hispanic American unity as paramount to future economic and political success in the world, and was the first president of the Republic of Gran Colombia, the successor to the Viceroyalty of New Granada, which encompassed modern Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, Venezuela, along with parts of Brazil, Guyana, and Peru. Bolívar today is largely revered in almost every single Hispanic American country, being seen as both a founding father and a patriot, with the countries of Bolivia and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela both being named after him. However, Bolívar's vision of pan-Hispanic unity never came to fruition, and shortly after his death in 1830, Gran Colombia was dissolved, and any dreams of a continent-wide unification effort largely died with him. Further devolution took place in parts of the former Spanish Empire, with Mexico being divided between Mexico and the modern Central American countries, although Peru and Bolivia did enter a short-lived confederation from 1836 to 1839, however, it fell apart almost immediately. The main reasons for the disunity between the many Hispanic countries largely boiled down to a lack of a single national identity, the lust for power by various leaders, and simply distance, with the lack of communication and massive travel times being huge hindrances to unity, with it taking weeks to travel from somewhere like Lima to Mexico City, a problem that no other integrated country had to deal with. As mentioned previously, in the modern world there are about 20 Hispanic countries in the Americas today, with populations ranging from only a few million to over 130 million. And although it's very unlikely that they'll be forming a single country anytime soon, it would only make sense from an economic and political standpoint that having a united economy and government would greatly increase their power and influence in the world stage. This is going to be similar to the video on what if the Anglo world united as a single country, except we're going to exclude Spain from this new Hispanic country as to make it more realistic, along with other former Spanish colonies that are not in the Americas, such as the Philippines, Western Sahara, and Equatorial Guinea in Africa. However, we are going to be including the country of Belize, seeing how, although it was most recently a British colony, it does have a huge connection to the neighboring Hispanic nations of Central America, and because of immigration from neighboring countries, over half of its population speaks Spanish as a first language, so it's sometimes considered to be both an Anglo and Hispanic country. You might not think about it, but if combined, these Hispanic countries would have a population of over 416 million people, over 25% higher than that of the United States, or about twice as much as that of Brazil, making it the third largest in the world, and around 49% would live in North America and 51% being in South America. The area would be 4.4 million square miles or 11.5 million square kilometers, making it larger than any other country in the world other than Russia, and would stretch over 6,600 miles from the northernmost point at Tijuana to the southernmost point at Tierra del Fuego. For comparison, Russia is only around 6,000 miles wide, meaning that the new Hispanic country would be longer than Russia is wide. Now you're starting to see the logistical problems with having such an elongated country, but seeing how interconnected the world is in the modern age, it would be much easier to maintain such a large territory now than it would have been 200 years ago. When Latin American climate comes to mind, most people would conjure up images of never-ending rainforests, but the country would actually contain many different climate regions such as the Sonoran Desert in Mexico, Amazon rainforest of Peru and others, along with the frigid island of Tierra del Fuego split between Argentina and Chile. And with a population density of 94 people per square mile, it's actually slightly higher than that in the US today. Hispanic America's power and influence today is arguably even higher than that of its former colonial master, with a population 9 times larger than its father country of Spain, and you could actually fit the country of Spain 20 times in the new country of Hispanic America. With a GDP of $6.9 trillion, its economy would be very influential, being the 4th highest in the world just after India, and an average income of about $16,000 a year makes it about average worldwide, although the economy of most nations in Hispanic America are growing incredibly quickly and will most likely rise to a GDP per capita of $25,000 by the year 2022. The largest city in the country would be Mexico City at 20.4 million people in its metropolitan area, followed by Buenos Aires, Argentina at 13.6 million, Bogota, Colombia at 11.2 million, Lima, Peru at 10.9 million, and Santiago, Chile at 7.2 million, meaning that many of the largest cities in the Americas would all be in this new country. Now, on to what I think is one of the most interesting ramifications of this new country is the demographics, and considering the history of Hispanic America, it would be among the most diverse in the world. No one racial group would make up a majority of the country, although mestizos would be the largest at 186 million people, or 44.6% of the population, being a majority in most countries now, like Mexico, Colombia, or Venezuela, and they would most likely dominate politics in the country. Others of multiracial ancestry would include mulattoes at 3.5%, Zambos, who are half African, half Amerindian, at 0.7%, and those of combined European, African, and Amerindian ancestry at 0.6%, although this number is possibly much larger considering that many of self-identified European, mestizo, mulatto, or African ancestry have at least some DNA from all 3 of these sources. Those of European descent would make up over 127 million people, or about 30% of the country, with the largest concentration in the far south in Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay, along with northern Mexico, Colombia, and Venezuela. Unlike the United States, where most of the European population comes from a Germanic or Celtic origin, such as the English, German, or Irish, most of the European population of Hispanic countries is of Castilian origin, of course, but also with huge minorities of Italians, Basques, and French, with smaller minorities of Germans, Slavs, and other European groups. The emigration rate from Spain during and after the colonial period is truly astounding, with there being almost twice as many Castilians in Hispanic America than in the actual country of Spain. There would also be minorities of Middle Easterners at 2.2%, mostly Syrians, Palestinians, and Lebanese, along with those of African descent at 3%, and various Asian groups at 1.2%. The natives would constitute a little over 13%, with some areas like Peru, Guatemala, and Bolivia having a much larger percentage of those of Amerindian descent, all around 40 to 50%, while Mexico would have the largest overall number. The Amerindian population is extremely diverse, with there being literally thousands of different native languages and ethnic groups, with the largest being the Quechua people in Peru at 11 million people, followed by the Mayans, who are split between many different subgroups of southern Mexico and Guatemala at 9 million, followed by the Aztecs and Aymara at 3 million each, and many, many others. Seeing the huge degree of Spanish heritage and culture among all of the former countries that would make up the new country, Spanish is the predominant language in nearly every country, except for Paraguay, but that's a whole different story. And about 91.3% of people would speak Spanish as a first language, while up to 96.6% would be fluent in the language, which means that 80% of all Spanish speakers in the world would be located there. Also, because of the heritage from Romance Europe, around 72% would be Catholic, giving it the largest number of Catholics in the world, with 15% Protestant, and smaller minorities of Muslims, Buddhists, and practitioners of native Amerindian religions. Even though it's unlikely that the Hispanic American countries will be putting aside their differences anytime soon to form a super country spanning 2 continents, if they did, it would certainly be a force to be reckoned with, certainly being able to compete with the USA and Brazil in the American continents, and possibly even in a global market. Go ahead and let me know your thoughts on this scenario, what the name of the country would be, and where the capital would be. I was going to wait a little bit before posting this, but you guys really seem to enjoy my last video in this style about the Anglo countries of the world, and honestly, they're a lot of fun to make, so be sure to tell me if I should do more like this. As always, thanks for watching everyone. This has been Mason, and I'll see you next time.